The ship was dead. Princess Ilara could see that even before her vessel came close to it. The human craft floated in the darkness of the outer rings like a broken toy. Smoke still drifted from the holes in its side. The lights were gone. No signals came from it. "We should leave it alone," said Commander Hallen. His silver skin caught the light from the control screens. "It is a human ship. There is nothing of value inside." Ilara did not answer. She stood at the window and watched the wreck spin slowly in the emptiness of space. Her people, the Velari, had little respect for humans. They called them primitive. They said humans lived short lives and died easily. They said humans were like animals that had learned to build machines. But Ilara had always been curious. She was the third daughter of Queen Serath, and no one expected great things from her. Her older brother Vorin would rule one day. Her sisters were beautiful and cold like proper Velari royalty. Ilara was different. She asked questions. She wondered about things she should not wonder about. "Bring us closer," she said. Commander Hallen made a sound of displeasure but obeyed. The princess had authority here, even if she was the least important of the royal children. The rescue shuttle crossed the gap between the two ships. Ilara insisted on going herself. 4 Velari guards came with her, their long fingers wrapped around elegant weapons. They moved through the broken hallways of the human ship with careful steps. The smell hit them first, smoke and blood and something else. Something burned. The guards covered their noses. Velari senses were sharp, and this was almost too much to bear. They found bodies, human bodies, small compared to the tall Velari, but thick with muscle in strange ways. Most were dead from wounds or from the cold that was creeping into the ship. Ilara counted 7 of them before they reached the main room. That was where they found him. He lay against a wall, his back to the metal. Blood covered his chest. A deep cut ran across his face from his forehead to his chin, missing his eye by a small distance. His clothes were torn and burned. One of his arms bent at an angle that looked wrong. He should have been dead. Any Velari with those wounds would have died hours ago. Their bodies were elegant but fragile. They could not survive such damage. But this human was breathing. Ilara knelt beside him. Up close, she could see the scars that already covered his skin. Old wounds, many of them. This was not a man who had lived a peaceful life. "Princess, we should go," said one of the guards. "If he wakes, he could be dangerous." "He is dying," Ilara said. "How can a dying man be dangerous?" She reached out and touched his face. His skin was warm, too warm. Fever was burning inside him, fighting to keep him alive. His eyes moved beneath their closed lids. Then they opened. Ilara had seen many eyes in her life. Velari eyes glowed with soft light in colors of blue and silver and gold. They were beautiful and calm. Human eyes were different. She had heard they were dull and simple. These eyes were not dull. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held something that made Ilara's breath stop in her throat. Pain was there, yes, but also something else. Something that looked at her and measured her and decided in that single moment whether she was friend or enemy. "I will not hurt you," she said softly. "I am going to help you." The human stared at her for a long moment. Then his eyes closed again, and his body went limp. "Bring him to our ship," Ilara commanded. The guards looked at each other. "Princess, this is not wise. Humans are unpredictable. Commander Hallen will not approve." "Commander Hallen serves my family," Ilara said. Her voice was still soft, but something in it had changed. "Bring the human, now." They brought him. The medical bay on Ilara's ship was designed for Velari bodies. The doctors did not know what to do with a human. They argued about his strange blood and his thick bones and the way his heart beat too fast. They said he would die before morning. He did not die. 3 days passed. The human floated between life and death, but he kept breathing. His wounds began to close on their own in ways that amazed the doctors. His fever broke on the second night. By the third day, his eyes were opening more often. Ilara visited him every few hours. She did not know why. Something about him pulled at her curiosity. He never spoke, only watched her with those dark eyes. He seemed to be waiting for something. On the fourth night, it happened. Ilara was sleeping in her quarters when the alarm screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed. Guards shouted in the hallways. She grabbed a robe and ran toward the noise. The medical bay door was open. Inside, she saw chaos. 3 figures in black stood among the broken equipment. Assassins. They moved with the quick grace of trained killers. 2 Velari guards lay on the floor, silver blood pooling beneath them. And in the center of the room stood the human. He should not have been standing. He should not have been conscious. His wounds were barely closed. The doctors had said he needed weeks to recover. But there he was on his feet with a metal rod in his hand. One assassin already lay at his feet, neck bent at a terrible angle. The other 2 attacked together. They were fast, faster than any human should be able to match. But this human did not try to match their speed. He moved differently. Where they were graceful, he was brutal. Where they aimed for precise strikes, he threw his whole body into every movement. He took a blade across his shoulder and did not stop. He took a kick to his broken arm and used that same arm to grab his attacker and pull him close. The second assassin died with a crushed throat. The third tried to run. The human threw the metal rod. It struck the assassin in the back of the head with terrible force. He fell and did not get up. Then the human turned and saw Ilara in the doorway. Blood ran down his shoulder. His legs shook with exhaustion. He looked like he might fall at any moment. But he did not fall. He stayed on his feet until he saw that she was safe. He looked at her with those dark eyes and seemed to be asking a silent question. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine," Ilara whispered. Only then did he allow himself to collapse. He fell to his knees first, then forward onto his hands. His breathing was heavy and wet. The effort had cost him greatly. Ilara ran to him. She knelt beside him and put her hand on his back. She could feel his heart pounding beneath his skin, feel the heat of his fever returning. "You fool," she said. "You almost died again." He looked up at her. For a moment she thought she saw something in his eyes. Not pain, not anger, something softer, something like purpose. Then his eyes closed and he slept. Commander Hallen arrived with more guards. He looked at the dead assassins, at the wounded human, at the princess kneeling in blood that was not her own. "Princess," he said carefully, "we should dispose of this human. He is too dangerous to keep." Ilara stood. She looked at the commander with eyes that had grown cold. "This human just saved my life," she said. "He stays, that is my command." "Your mother will not approve." "Then my mother can tell me herself." She looked down at the sleeping human. His chest rose and fell with difficult breaths. His face, even in sleep, held that same stubborn expression, like he was fighting even in his dreams. She did not know his name. She did not know where he came from or why his ship was destroyed. She did not know anything about him except one simple truth. He had protected her. He had given everything he had to keep her safe, and he had asked for nothing in return. "What is your name?" she whispered, knowing he could not hear. She would learn it later. She would learn everything about him later. For now, she simply made her decision. This human would stay with her, whatever that meant, whatever came next. He would stay. His name was Kang Ti. It took Ilara 2 weeks to learn this. The human did not speak much. He answered questions with short words or simple nods. He did not explain where he came from. He did not talk about the attack on his ship or the people who had died there. He simply existed beside her like a shadow that had learned to walk. The Velari court whispered about him, a human on a royal ship, a primitive creature following the princess like a pet. Some laughed, some were disgusted. Prince Vorin, Ilara's older brother, called it an embarrassment to the royal blood. Ilara did not care. She watched T recover from his wounds with a speed that amazed the doctors. Within 3 weeks he was walking. Within 5 weeks he was training. The guards watched him exercise in the cargo bay, pushing his body through movements that looked painful. He would do the same thing over and over until his muscles shook and sweat covered his skin. "Why does he hurt himself like this?" one guard asked another. "Humans are strange creatures," the other replied. "They do not know how to rest." But Alara understood. She had read about humans. They came from a world called Earth, a planet that wanted to kill them. Their sun burned their skin. Their animals hunted them. Their weather tried to freeze them and drown them and blow them away. Everything about their home was harsh. And yet humans survived. They did more than survive. They spread across their planet and then beyond it. They built ships and flew to the stars. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. They were not the smartest. But they never stopped. That was what made them different. They simply never stopped. T proved this truth every day. 3 months after Alara found him, the diplomatic voyage began. Queen Sarath had ordered Alara to visit the Kelthan system for trade discussions. It was a small mission, unimportant, given to the third daughter because no one else wanted it. Alara brought tea with her. Prince Vorin laughed at this during the farewell ceremony. "Taking your pet to foreign lands," he said. "Be careful, sister, he might bite someone." T stood behind Alara. He did not react to the insult. His face was calm and empty, but Alara noticed how his eyes followed Vorin with careful attention. He was watching, measuring. She had seen that look before. The voyage should have been simple. 3 days to reach the Kelthan system, 2 days of meetings, 3 days to return. Easy and boring. On the second day, the shuttle exploded. Alara remembered the flash of light. She remembered the screaming of metal and the terrible sound of the world breaking apart. She remembered falling, falling, falling through fire and smoke. Then darkness. When she woke, she was lying on green moss. Strange trees rose above her, their leaves blocking a red sun. The air was thick and wet and smelled like rotting plants. Her body hurt. Her right leg was twisted beneath her in a way that sent sharp pain through her whole being. Silver blood stained her clothes. She tried to move and almost fainted from the agony. "Do not move." The voice came from her left. She turned her head and saw T. He was crouching beside her, his face covered in dirt and blood. A long cut ran down his arm. His clothes were torn and burned. But he was alive. He was awake. He was already working. "The shuttle is gone," he said. His voice was rough and quiet. "Most of the guards are dead. I pulled you from the fire." Alara tried to speak. Her throat was dry. Where are we?" "The jungle planet. We crashed." He looked around at the trees with narrow eyes. "We need to move. This place is not safe." He did not ask if she could walk. He already knew she could not. Instead, he simply lifted her. His arms went beneath her body, and he picked her up like she weighed nothing. Alara gasped at the sudden movement. "Your wounds," she managed to say. "You are hurt." "I will live," he said. He began to walk. The first day was the worst. T carried Alara through the jungle without rest. The plants grabbed at his legs. Insects the size of hands flew around them. Strange sounds came from the shadows between the trees. Twice predators attacked. Alara saw them only as flashes of teeth and claws. T set her down each time and faced the creatures with a broken piece of metal from the shuttle. He fought like she had seen him fight before. Brutal, direct, without mercy. He took wounds. The predators left gashes on his back and his sides, but he killed them and kept walking. By nightfall, Alara was crying, not from pain but from watching him suffer for her. "Stop," she begged. "Please rest." "Cannot rest," he said. His voice was weaker now. "Must find shelter, storms coming." He was right. As darkness fell, the sky turned purple and angry. Rain began to fall, but it was not normal rain. It burned. Acid, Ilara realized with horror. The rain on this planet was acid. T found a cave. It was small and dirty, but it protected them from the burning rain. He set Ilara down gently and then collapsed against the wall. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the hissing of acid rain outside and T's heavy breathing. "Why?" Ilara finally asked. T looked at her. His face was pale from blood loss. His eyes were tired. "Why what? Why are you doing this? You do not owe me anything. You could leave me. You could find shelter alone. You would survive longer without carrying me." T was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "On my ship I had people, a crew. They trusted me to protect them." He paused. "I failed. They died because I was not strong enough." Ilara waited. She knew there was more. "You saved me," T continued. "You pulled me from that dead ship when everyone told you to leave me. You gave me food and medicine. You let me stay even when your people called me an animal." He looked at her directly. In the darkness of the cave, his eyes seemed to glow with something deep and fierce. "You gave me a second chance, a reason to be strong again. I will not waste it." Ilara felt tears on her face, silver tears that caught the faint light from outside. "But you might die," she whispered. "Saving me might kill you." T smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile. It changed his whole face, making the hard lines softer. "Then I will die protecting something that matters," he said. "For a human, that is a good death." He closed his eyes and slept. Ilara watched him through the night, listening to his breathing, praying to God she barely believed in. Let him live, please let him live. The days that followed blurred together. T carried her through the jungle. He found water and food. He fought more predators and took more wounds. His fever returned, burning through his body, but he kept moving. Ilara tried to help. She pointed out dangers she could see from his arms. She cleaned his wounds when they stopped to rest. She talked to him, telling him stories about her people and her family, anything to keep him awake. On the seventh day, T stopped walking. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees with Ilara still in his arms. He caught himself before she hit the ground, but he could not stand again. "I am sorry," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I cannot." "It is okay," Ilara said. She reached up and touched his face. His skin was burning with fever. "You have done enough. You have done more than enough." He shook his head, stubborn, always stubborn. "Not yet," he said. "Not until you are safe." He crawled. With Ilara on his back, he crawled through the jungle on his hands and knees. It was slow and painful to watch. Every movement cost him something, but he would not stop. On the 12th day, the rescue ships found them. The Velari soldiers who came down from the sky did not believe what they saw. The princess was alive but weak, and the human was standing. Barely, his eyes were swollen shut with infection. His body was covered in wounds. He swayed like a tree in the wind, but he was on his feet, positioned between Ilara and the approaching soldiers, ready to fight if they were enemies. "It is okay," Ilara called out. "They are friends, they are here to help." Only then did T allow himself to fall. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The soldiers rushed forward to catch him, but Ilara got there first. She held his head in her lap and looked up at the Velari around her. "Save him," she commanded. Her voice was stronger than it had been in days. "Save him, or I will never forgive any of you." They saved him. Weeks later, when both of them were recovered, Ilara asked T a question. "You never said anything. When you picked me up after the crash, you never promised to protect me. You never swore an oath." T looked at her with those dark, quiet eyes. "Humans do not need words for promises," he said. "We make oaths with our actions." Ilara understood. She understood everything. She reached out and took his hand, his rough, scarred hand that had carried her through hell. "Then I make my own oath," she said. "You are mine now, and I am yours. Whatever comes next, we face it together." T squeezed her hand gently. He did not need words to answer. The homeworld of the Velari was beautiful. Crystal towers rose from silver seas. Gardens floated in the air, held up by ancient technology that no one remembered how to build. The sky was always soft purple, and 3 moons hung above the clouds like watching eyes. Alara had grown up here. She knew every corner of the palace, every secret path through the gardens. But now, standing at the entrance with T beside her, she felt like a stranger. The court was waiting. Hundreds of Velari nobles stood in the great hall. Their silver skin glowed in the light from the crystal ceiling. Their eyes, blue and gold and silver, all turned toward the princess and her human companion. No one spoke. The silence was heavy and judging. Prince Vorin stood at the front of the crowd. He looked at T with open disgust. "So the princess returns," he said, his voice carried through the hall. "With her pet still alive, how touching." Alara felt T tense beside her, but he did not move. He did not speak. He simply stood there, calm and patient, watching everything. "Brother," Alara said coolly, "I am glad to see you too." "You crashed on Velkin Prime," Vorin continued. 15 guards dead, a royal shuttle destroyed, and yet somehow you survived." His eyes moved to T. "Because this creature dragged you through the jungle like a pack animal. He saved my life." "He is a human." Vorin said the word like it was poison. "They are primitive. They are weak. They die from wounds that would barely scratch us. How can you trust your safety to such a thing?" Alara opened her mouth to answer, but a new voice spoke first. "Enough." The crowd parted. Queen Sereth walked through the hall with slow, measured steps. She was tall even for a Velari, and her eyes glowed with ancient silver light. Power radiated from her like heat from a star. Everyone bowed. Alara bowed. Even Vorin lowered his head. T did not bow. The crowd gasped. A human standing straight before the queen of the Velari Empire. It was an insult. It was unthinkable. Queen Sereth stopped in front of him. She was a full head taller than the human, and she looked down at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "You do not kneel," she observed. "I kneel to no one," T said. His voice was quiet but clear. "That is not disrespect. That is who I am." The queen studied him for a long moment. No one in the court dared to breathe. "Alara," the queen said, still looking at T, "come to my private chambers. We will speak, alone." She turned and walked away. The crowd parted again, and she disappeared through a golden door. Alara looked at T. He nodded slightly. "Go, I will be fine." She followed her mother. The queen's chambers were high above the palace. Windows looked out over the silver seas and the distant mountains. Sereth stood by one of these windows, her back to her daughter. "He refused to kneel," the queen said. "He is not our subject. He owes us nothing. He lives in my palace. He eats our food. He breathes our air. He owes us everything." Alara stepped forward. "He saved my life, mother. 3 assassins on the ship, 12 days in the jungle. He carried me on his back while predators attacked and acid rain burned his skin. He almost died for me, more than once." The queen turned. Her face was calm and cold. "And what does he want in return? Land, wealth, a position in the court. All creatures want something, Alara. Humans are no different." "He wants nothing." "Impossible." "I thought so too." Alara took a breath. "But it is true. He protects me because protecting is what he does. It gives him purpose. It makes him feel alive." The queen was silent. She walked to a chair and sat down slowly, like the weight of years was pressing on her shoulders. "The court is talking," she said. "They say you are weak. They say you need a human to protect you because you cannot protect yourself. Vorin uses this against you every day. I do not care what the court says." "You should care." The queen's voice sharpened. "You are a princess of the Velari Empire. Your actions reflect on our family, on me." She paused. "I am giving you a chance to correct this mistake. Send the human away. I will give him a ship and money. He can start a new life somewhere far from here." Alara felt cold anger rising in her chest. "And if I refuse? Then I will have him removed by force." Mother and daughter stared at each other. The silence stretched between them like a knife. "If you touch him," Alara said slowly, "I will leave this palace and never return. I will give up my title, my position, everything. I will walk away from this family and never look back." The queen's eyes widened slightly. It was the strongest show of emotion Alara had ever seen from her. "You would abandon your people for a human. He is the only one who has ever truly protected me, not for politics, not for power, just for me." Alara's voice broke slightly. "Can you say the same, Mother? Can anyone in this palace say the same?" The queen did not answer. Alara turned and walked toward the door. "I have said what I came to say. The human stays with me. If you wish to make an enemy of your daughter, that is your choice." She left without looking back. The days that followed were difficult. Vorin spread rumors through the court. He called Alara weak and foolish. He said she had lost her mind in the jungle. He said the human had corrupted her with primitive magic. Some nobles believed him. Others were not sure, but everyone watched and waited to see what would happen next. Vorin was not satisfied with whispers. He wanted to destroy T completely. "A challenge," he announced one evening at dinner. "Let the human prove his worth in the arena. If he is such a great protector, let him fight our champions." The court buzzed with excitement. A human fighting Velari warriors. It would be entertainment of the highest order. Alara stood. "No, I will not allow it." "You cannot refuse," Vorin said with a smile. "It is an official challenge. The rules of the court demand an answer." Alara looked at T. He sat beside her, eating quietly. When he felt her eyes on him, he looked up. "I will fight," he said simply. "T, no. Their champions are trained from birth. They are faster and stronger than you." "I know," he returned to his food. "I will still fight." The arena was an ancient place, built thousands of years ago for exactly this purpose. Smooth white stone formed a circle, and seats rose around it in gentle curves. Every seat was filled. The whole court had come to watch. T stood in the center of the arena. He wore simple clothes and carried no weapon. Across from him stood the first champion, a tall Velari male with arms like silver cables. The fight began. The Velari was fast. His strikes came like lightning, almost too quick to see. T blocked what he could and dodged what he could not. Within seconds, he was bleeding from cuts on his arms and face. The crowd cheered. The human was losing, just as expected. But T did not fall. He took every hit and kept moving. He studied his opponent, learning his patterns, and when the moment came, he struck. His fist caught the champion in the throat. The Velari gasped and stumbled backward. T followed, grabbing him and throwing him to the ground with brutal force. The champion did not get up. The crowd went silent. A second champion entered the arena. This one was female, smaller but faster. She fought with spinning kicks and quick jabs. T could barely keep up with her. She broke his nose. She cracked his ribs. She made him spit blood onto the white stone. But every time he fell, he stood up again. The fight lasted 10 minutes. By the end, both of them were exhausted. The Velari champion was barely standing, her silver skin marked with bruises. T was worse, much worse. He looked like he should be dead. But he was still standing. The champion looked at him with something new in her eyes. Confusion, perhaps even respect. "Why do you not yield?" she asked, breathing hard. T wiped blood from his mouth. "Humans do not yield." She nodded slowly, then she raised her hand. "I withdraw," she said. "The fight is over." The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. A Velari champion withdrawing against a human. It was unheard of. Prince Vorin rose from his seat. His face was dark with anger. "This proves nothing," he shouted. "The human lost both fights. He was beaten like the animal he is." Ilara stood as well. Her voice rang across the arena. "He lost. Look at him, brother. He is still standing. Your champions needed weapons and training and every advantage. He had nothing but his fists and his will." She pointed at T. "That is not weakness. That is strength you cannot understand." The court was silent. Everyone looked at the human in the center of the arena, bloody and broken but unbowed. And for the first time, some of them began to wonder. Perhaps humans were not as primitive as they had believed. Perhaps there was something inside them that the Velari did not have. Something stubborn, something unbreakable, something dangerous. That night, Ilara found T in his room. He was trying to bandage his own wounds, but his hands were shaking too much. "Let me," she said. She sat beside him and wrapped clean cloth around his injuries. He watched her with tired eyes. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For standing up for me, in front of everyone." Ilara smiled sadly. "You would do the same for me." "I would." She finished the bandage and sat back. "T, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." He nodded. "Are you tired of this? Of fighting against people who will never accept you? You could leave, I would understand." T was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "I have been alone for most of my life. I have fought in wars I did not believe in. I have lost people I loved. I have done things I am not proud of." He looked at her. "But here with you I have a purpose, something worth fighting for." He reached out and took her hand. "I am not tired," he said. "I am just getting started." Ilara felt tears in her eyes. She squeezed his hand and smiled. "Then we face tomorrow together." "Together," he agreed. Outside the window, the 3 moons rose over the silver sea, and somewhere in the palace, Prince Vorin was making new plans. The battle for respect had just begun. The Festival of Ascendance came once every 10 years. It was the most sacred celebration in the Velari Empire, a time when the 3 moons aligned perfectly above the palace. Ancient songs would be sung. Old alliances would be renewed. The royal family would stand together before the people. Security was everywhere. Thousands of guards patrolled the palace halls. Energy shields hummed around the main buildings. Nothing could go wrong. That was what everyone believed. Ilara walked through the great hall with T at her side. She wore a silver dress that caught the moonlight from the windows. T wore simple black clothes as he always did. He looked out of place among the glittering nobles, but he did not seem to care. "You should try to smile," Ilara said quietly. "People are staring." "Let them stare." T's eyes moved constantly, scanning the crowd. "Something feels wrong tonight." "Wrong how?" "I do not know yet." He frowned slightly. "Too many new faces, guards in places they should not be, small things." Ilara trusted his instincts. She had learned to trust them over the past months. When T said something was wrong, it usually was. "Should we tell my mother?" "Tell her what? That a human has a bad feeling." T shook his head. She would not listen. They moved through the celebration carefully. The music played. Nobles danced and laughed. Wine flowed like water. Everything seemed perfect. Until it was not. The first explosion came at exactly midnight. A blast of fire tore through the eastern gate, killing 20 guards in an instant. Before the smoke cleared, more explosions followed. The main hall, the garden tower, the royal chambers. Chaos erupted. People screamed and ran in every direction. Guards tried to form defensive lines, but they were cut down by attackers pouring through the broken walls. The enemy wore black armor and moved with trained precision. They killed without hesitation. Ilara felt T grab her arm and pull her down behind a pillar. Stay low, he said. His voice was calm but hard. We need to move. My family, I need to find my mother. The queen has her own guards, you do not. T looked around the corner, watching the battle. There are at least 40 attackers in this hall alone. We cannot fight through them. We need another way. Alara remembered the secret passages of the palace. She had played in them as a child. This way, she said, I know a path. They moved through the shadows. T kept himself between Alara and the fighting, shielding her body with his own. Twice, attackers spotted them. Twice, T killed them before they could raise an alarm. His fighting was different tonight. Alara had seen him fight in the arena, holding back, trying to survive. This was not that. This was killing, quick and brutal and without mercy. It scared her, but it also made her feel safe. They reached a hidden door behind a tapestry. Alara pressed a hidden switch, and the wall slid open. They slipped inside just as more attackers ran past. The secret passage was dark and dusty. No one had used it in years. Alara led the way, holding T's hand so they would not be separated. Where does this lead? T asked. The eastern wing. My quarters are there. We can hide. And then what? Then we wait for rescue. The palace has defenses. The outer fleet will respond. We just need to survive until then. T did not argue. He simply followed. They emerged in a long hallway near Alara's rooms. The fighting was distant here, but they could still hear explosions and screams echoing through the palace. Red emergency lights flashed along the walls. Then they heard footsteps ahead. T pushed Alara behind him. A group of attackers appeared around the corner, 5 of them armed with energy weapons. When they saw the princess, their leader smiled. There she is, he said. The third daughter. Our employer will be very pleased. Your employer? Alara felt cold. Who sent you? The leader laughed. You will find out soon enough. T stepped forward. Let her go, take me instead. More laughter. A human? What use is a human to us? The leader raised his weapon. Step aside, creature. We only want the princess. T did not step aside. He moved. What happened next was hard to follow. T was fast, faster than Alara had ever seen him move. He closed the distance before the leader could fire. His first strike crushed the attacker's throat. The second took his weapon. The other 4 raised their guns. T used the leader's body as a shield, pushing forward. He fired 3 shots. 3 attackers fell. The last one turned to run. T threw the empty weapon. It struck the back of the attacker's head with a crack that echoed through the hallway. 5 enemies, less than 10 seconds. T stood in the middle of the bodies, breathing hard. Blood dripped from a cut on his arm where an energy bolt had grazed him. Are you hurt? Alara asked, rushing forward. I am fine. He picked up 2 more weapons. Keep moving. They had not gone far when they heard another sound, coughing and gasping from a side corridor. Alara recognized the voice. Vorin. They found the prince lying against a wall. His leg was broken, bone visible through torn flesh. His silver blood pooled on the floor. His personal guards were nowhere to be seen. They left me, he gasped when he saw Alara. My guards, when the attack came, they ran. They left me to die. T knelt beside him. He examined the wound with quick, practiced hands. The bleeding needs to stop. He will die without treatment. Alara looked at her brother. He had hated her. He had tried to humiliate T. He had spread rumors and lies about both of them. Leave him, part of her whispered. But she could not. He was still her brother. Help him, she told T. T did not hesitate. He tore strips from his own shirt and wrapped them around Vorin's leg, tight enough to slow the bleeding. The prince screamed in pain. Why? Vorin gasped, staring at the human. Why are you helping me, after everything I did to you? T finished the bandage and stood up. He looked down at the prince with no anger, no hatred, just simple honesty. Because she asked me to. He lifted Voron onto his back, carrying him like he had carried Alara through the jungle. The prince weighed nothing to him. They moved on. The battle was getting closer now. They could hear fighting in the nearby halls. The attackers were spreading through the palace, hunting for the royal family. They turned a corner and found themselves in the throne room. The great hall was in ruins, pillars had crumbled. The crystal ceiling had cracked, letting moonlight pour through in broken beams. Bodies lay everywhere, guards and attackers alike. And in the center of the room, surrounded by enemies, stood Queen Serath. She was wounded. Silver blood stained her robes, but she stood tall, facing down a circle of attackers who were closing in slowly. "Mother!" Alara screamed. The attackers turned. They saw the princess, the prince on the human's back. They saw new prey. "Kill them all," their commander ordered. "Leave no survivors." They rushed forward. T set Voron down gently and stepped in front of Alara. "Stay behind me," he said. "No matter what happens, stay behind me." Then he walked toward the attackers, not ran, walked, like he had all the time in the world. The first attacker swung a blade at his head. T ducked under it and broke the man's arm with a single strike. He took the blade and cut the next enemy down before he could react. More came. T fought through them like a storm through leaves. He took wounds and kept moving, a cut across his back, a blade in his shoulder, a kick that cracked his ribs. None of it slowed him down. Alara watched in horror and awe. She had known T was dangerous. She had not known he was this dangerous. He was roaring now, shouting in a language she did not understand. Human words, war cries from Earth. The sound of them filled the throne room, drowning out the screams of his enemies. The queen watched with wide eyes. She had never seen anything like this. No one had. 17 attackers fell before T stopped. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by bodies, covered in blood that was mostly not his own. His chest heaved with exhaustion. His wounds were serious, perhaps fatal. But he was standing. The remaining enemies hesitated. They looked at the human, at the bodies of their comrades, at the impossible thing that had just happened. Then they ran. Palace guards arrived moments later. They found the queen alive, the prince wounded, the princess unharmed. And they found the human standing over all of them, still ready to fight, still refusing to fall. Later, when the battle was over and the palace was secured, Queen Serath sat in her private chambers. She watched recordings of the battle on a screen. She watched the human tear through trained killers like they were nothing. She watched him protect her children with his own body, watched him nearly die for people who had called him an animal. She did not understand. She had lived for 300 years, and she did not understand this. But she wanted to. She called for the human. T came. He was wrapped in bandages, pale from blood loss. He should have been in the medical bay, but when the queen summoned, he came. "Sit," she said. T shook his head. "I am fine standing." The queen studied him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Alara had ever heard it. "You saved my son tonight. You saved my daughter. You probably saved me." She paused. "Why?" T looked at her with tired eyes. "Because they matter to someone I care about. That is enough." The queen nodded slowly. Something in her ancient eyes had changed. "Rest," she said. "Tomorrow we will speak again." T turned to leave. At the door he stopped. "Your Majesty." "Yes." The attack was organized, well-funded. Someone inside the palace gave them information. He looked back at her. "You have enemies closer than you think." Then he was gone, walking slowly down the hallway, leaving the queen alone with her thoughts. Outside the palace, the 3 moons hung crimson in the sky, colored by smoke and fire. The night of crimson stars was over. But something new had begun. 1 week had passed since the attack. The palace was still being repaired. Workers moved through the damaged halls, replacing broken stone and cracked crystal. The dead had been honored and buried. The wounded were healing. The traitors had been found. Several nobles who had sold information to the enemy. They were arrested and faced justice. The Velari Empire was safe once more. But the court was not the same as before. People whispered different things now. They spoke of the human who had killed 17 attackers with his bare hands. They spoke of how he had carried the prince to safety, even though the prince had treated him with hate. They spoke of the way he had stood between the queen and death itself. The word animal was not used anymore. On the morning of the 7th day, a message came to Alara's quarters. The queen was summoning T to the throne room, not a private meeting, a public one. The entire court was to attend. Alara went with him. She held his hand as they walked through the palace halls. T was still healing, moving slower than usual, but he walked with his head high as always. "Do you know what this is about?" he asked. "No," Alara squeezed his hand, "but my mother is not the same as before. Something changed in her that night." "People change when they see death up close." "You speak from experience." T nodded but said nothing more. The throne room had been repaired quickly. New pillars stood where the old ones had fallen. The cracked ceiling had been replaced with clear crystal that let the purple sky shine through. The court filled the hall, hundreds of nobles in their finest clothes. Queen Sereth sat on her throne. She wore a crown of silver light and her eyes glowed with ancient power. But when she saw T enter the room, something in her expression softened. Prince Voron stood beside the throne. His leg was in a healing brace and he leaned on a silver cane. When he saw T, he did not look away with disgust as he once would have. He nodded slightly, a greeting, perhaps even respect. Alara and T walked to the center of the room. They stopped before the throne and waited. The queen rose to her feet. The hall fell completely silent. "1 week ago," she began, her voice carrying to every corner, "this palace was attacked. Our enemies thought they would destroy us. They thought our guards would fail. They thought our family would fall." She paused, letting the words sink in. "They were wrong." Murmurs passed through the crowd. "We survived because of many brave warriors. Our guards fought and died defending these walls. Our soldiers pushed back the enemy. They all deserve honor." She turned her gaze to T. "But there is one who deserves special attention, one who came from outside our empire, one who owed us nothing, one who we treated with suspicion and contempt." T stood straight under her gaze. He did not flinch. He did not look away. "This human saved my daughter in the jungle of Velkin Prime. He carried her through acid rain and predator attacks for 12 days. He nearly died to protect her." The court was silent now. Everyone remembered that story. They had called it an embarrassment. They had laughed at the princess who needed a human to save her. They were not laughing now. "When assassins came for my daughter on her ship, he rose from his deathbed and killed them. When my son was abandoned by his own guards, this human carried him to safety. When I was surrounded by enemies, he cut through them like a blade through paper." The queen walked down the steps from her throne. She moved slowly, each step deliberate. The crowd parted before her. She stopped in front of T. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. The ancient queen and the young human, two people from different worlds. Then she asked the question, "Who guards you so fiercely, daughter?" Alara felt the words in her chest. This was the moment everything had been leading to, every trial, every whisper, every battle. She stepped forward to stand beside T. She looked at her mother, at the court, at the people who had called her weak and foolish. Her voice was clear and strong. "My human." The words echoed through the hall. Some nobles gasped. Others simply stared. No one had ever heard a princess claim a human so openly. But the queen smiled. A small smile, barely visible but real. The Velari have ruled for 10,000 years, she said, still looking at T. We have survived because we understood one truth. Power alone is not enough. Strength alone is not enough. One must know what is worth protecting. She reached out and placed her hand on T's shoulder. The crowd gasped again. A queen touching a human. It was unheard of. You understand this truth better than any of my children, she continued. Better than most of my people. You do not fight for glory. You do not fight for reward. You fight because protecting is who you are. She turned to the court. Today I offer this human something that has never been offered to an outsider. A name bond, the highest honor of our people. It makes him part of the royal house. Not a servant, not a guard, family. The silence was absolute. A name bond had not been given in over 500 years. The queen looked back at T. Do you accept? T was quiet for a long moment. His eyes moved to Alara. She nodded, tears forming in her luminous eyes. I accept, he said. The queen nodded. She spoke ancient words in the old Velari tongue, words of binding and belonging, words that made the human, in the eyes of law and tradition, part of the family. When she finished, she stepped back. Rise, King T of the Velari, you are one of us now. T did not rise because he had never knelt. He simply stood there the same as always, but something had changed. The way the court looked at him had changed. He was not an animal anymore. He was not a pet, he was family. Vorin stepped forward. He was moving slowly, still in pain from his wounds. When he reached T, he stopped. I hated you, the prince said quietly. I thought you were beneath us, beneath me. T said nothing, he waited. I was wrong. Vorin extended his hand in the human custom he had clearly learned just for this moment. Thank you for saving my life. T looked at the offered hand. Then he reached out and took it. You are welcome, he said simply. The court burst into applause. Not everyone was happy. Some nobles still held their old beliefs, but most of them were clapping, cheering for the human who had proved himself in the hardest way possible. Later that night, Ilara and T stood on a balcony high above the palace. The 3 moons hung in the purple sky, full and bright. The silver sea glittered far below. They stood in comfortable silence for a long time. So Ilara finally said, You are a Velari now. Technically. How does it feel? T thought about it. The same, I am still who I was. The title does not change that. Ilara smiled. You never change. That is one of the things I love about you. T looked at her. Love. She felt heat in her cheeks. That is not what I meant. Yes, it is. He turned to face her fully. His dark eyes were soft in the moonlight. Ilara, I need to ask you something. Something I have wanted to ask for a long time. She felt her heart beating faster. Yes. Why me? You could have left me on that ship. You could have listened to your advisors. You could have let me go at any point. Why did you keep me close? Ilara was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When I first saw you, she said slowly, you were dying. Any other creature would have been dead already. But you were fighting. Even unconscious, you were fighting. I could see it in the way your heart beat, in the way your hands clenched. She stepped closer to him. I had never seen anything like that. My whole life, I had been surrounded by people who gave up easily, who calculated risks and chose safety, who never fought for anything that did not benefit them. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the scar that ran from his forehead to his chin. You were different. You are different. You fight because you believe in something. You protect because it gives your life meaning. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You make me want to be stronger, better, more. T was silent. His eyes searched her face. I am just a human, he finally said. I am not special. I am not magical. I am just a man who found something worth protecting. And what is that? He smiled, the same rare smile she had seen in the cave on Velkin Prime. You. He leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and warm, and Alara felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. She wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. When they finally pulled apart, they stayed in each other's arms, looking out at the stars. "What happens now?" Alara asked. "I do not know," T admitted. "There are still enemies out there, still dangers to face. The ones who attacked the palace were just the beginning." "Are you worried?" He shook his head. "Humans are not good at worrying about the future. We focus on the present, on what we can protect right now." Ilara smiled. "Then what are you focused on right now?" T looked at her, at the princess who had saved him from death, at the woman who had stood by him when everyone else called him an animal, at the person who had given him a reason to live again. "You," he said, "always you." They stayed on the balcony until the moons began to set. They talked about everything and nothing. They made plans and promises. They dreamed about a future that neither of them could predict. And when the first light of dawn began to color the sky, T spoke one final time. "You asked me once why I do what I do, why I protect you so fiercely, why I give everything and ask for nothing." Ilara nodded. "I remember." "I never answered properly." He took her hands in his. "I do it because you gave me something no one else ever did, a home, a purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You gave me something to protect, and for a human, that is all we ever need." Ilara closed her eyes and smiled. Far below, the palace was waking. A new day was beginning. A new chapter in the history of the Velari Empire. A chapter that would tell the story of a princess and her human. A story of love and loyalty and stubborn refusal to give up. It was a story that would be told for generations. And it was only just beginning.